And it is the top of the hour. Cary Harris with you, your new best friend. Welcome. Well, a hell of a day today. By the time you're hearing this, if you're not hearing it live, and we know, given modern times, people stream, people hear this as a podcast. 3 weeks from now, maybe you're at the gym. I have no idea. Maybe we're at war. Maybe we're not. A war on the soil of Europe means a whole lot more than just icky for those of us here in the United States. Everything is globally interconnected. Stock markets, trade, airplanes, fuel prices. So you don't want this. And I just have to say, somehow in our bizarre governmental memory, this is back in around 1989, 1990, 1991, we officially told the Russians that if they dropped that wall, as King Ronald I sat from his throne and insisted upon Mr. Gorbachev, that we would not ever push any of the former savvy Soviet satellite countries. That's SAVI, if you want a really weird acronym. Push the former Soviet satellite countries into NATO. That was the deal. And somehow, Biden et al., the Democrats, the Republicans, CNN and MSNBC, yay, let's have some war, have forgotten that we said we wouldn't, and we have been pushing. I am not in any way defending Putin. I am not in any way defending Russia. But I'm pointing out that if the Russians were on the border of the United States, let's say in Mexico, what would our reaction be? Well, send them some suntan lotion. I don't think so. So conspicuously missing is the fact that we said we wouldn't, and we are. We meaning NATO, but NATO is not Europe. NATO is the United States with an extended penis called Europe, poking the bear. So let's hope nothing bad happens. And now that I have given you a voluptuous metaphor that will ring with you forever in your permanent memory of fun, frolic, mayhem, and merriment, it is time for our 7 facts about Ukraine and deadly men in funny hats with none other than our friend and investigative reporter, Greg Palast. Greg, welcome to Harrison's Reality Fact. No, you're the reality injection. What the Ukraine crisis, the heck, does it have to do with men in funny hats?
Like every conflict over the past 2,000 years, Mr. Harrison, this is at heart a religious war. Now, understand that most of the people who live in this tiny little eastern fragment, it's about a 5% of Ukraine that live in the Crimean area. They are Russian Orthodox. They follow the Moscow Patriarchate. Are you taking notes?
About Can 15, you see my pen?
Yeah, so about...
Am I taking
notes?
Let's
not talk about that. And about 15% of the Donbass is Muslim. Now, the rest of the population of the Ukraine, almost all of it is either the Kiev Orthodox Church Patriarchate or the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, and there are no Muslims outside of the Donbass. So the Moscow Orthodox Patriarch, Kirill, he wants to protect Ukrainian followers who have been persecuted since Ukraine split off from, was ejected by the Soviets. And you have to understand, it's not been, it's not tension. We're talking about at least 3,000 Orthodox, Russian Orthodox civilians have been killed in bombardments by the Ukrainian forces. And most of those casualties, by the way, are children. And it's still going on. So now, if you ask me, what's the difference between the Ukrainian Kiev Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, and the Russian Orthodox Church, and maybe someone can call in, but heck if I know. But all I do know is that their patriarchs wear different funny hats. It's what Freud, so why the battle between people who basically believe in the same God who doesn't exist? Well, Freud called it the narcissism of small differences.
Right, like at the Episcopal Church, the bishop wears a yarmulke, but it's not a yarmulke.
Right.
It's just pink,
different
literally.
type, right? So the one hope here is that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is Jewish, and in other words, he doesn't have a dog in the fight. And though I have to say, Dmitry Medvedev, who is the former president of Russia, has been issuing anti-Semitic screeds saying that's why Russia shouldn't talk to Ukraine. But to add gasoline to the fire, the religious right in Ukraine. Now we have the return of the former president, Petro Poroshenko. I hope you're still taking notes. Who's a chocolate magnate. He's calling for blood. And of course, on the other hand, you have Kirill in Moscow telling Putin he wants blood and Putin needs the church to stay in power.
Well, this opens up a second question, but I just want to reintroduce you. For as Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz said, my people come and go so quickly here, as we do in our cars driving. We're talking to Greg Palast, famous investigative reporter. You know him from BBC, you know him from Rolling Stone and many documentaries and everywhere else. He's really doing a deep dig on this whole Ukraine thing so you can get the big backstory. And then coming up in a few minutes, we're also going to be talking with the Human Rights Campaign, different human rights here on U.S. soil, most particularly in what looks like a flaccid finorder known as Florida, and the incredible surveillance state that is starting to pop up as of today. But thanks to the Human Rights Campaign, we're outing all of that, and they're going to explain more in just a minute. So second question, Greg Palast, is the Donbass that you mentioned earlier, the Crimea region, Russian or Ukraine?
Okay, before people jump at me, I don't have a dog in the fight either, but I do have some in-laws there in the Donbass. As far as they're concerned, they're Russians.
You do have a dog
Russians.
in the fight.
Well, don't call my in-laws a dog. Okay, but they consider themselves Russians. They've always been Russians. They speak Russian. They defeated Hitler as Russians, not Ukrainians. And you have to understand that Ukraine and the eastern segment of, not Ukraine, but the Crimea and the eastern segment of Ukraine were part of Russia for 2 centuries, 1783 to 1954. And what happened in 54 is that Nikita Khrushchev took power after Stalin died, and he was in a fight with a Politburo, the prime minister, Georgy Melenkov. So Khrushchev, to bolster his allies, simply sliced off the Crimea, sliced off the Donbass, where they're part of Tatarstan, and gave it to the Ukrainian Soviet leader. So it was an internal battle, but it was, in other words, it was handed off in 1954. This is not some, Crimea and Donbass were not part of Ukraine for centuries. It's 1954, and that was determined by the Communist Party infighting. And as I've, by the way, I'm posting a commentary on and this fact sheet on Ukraine at gregpalast.com, and you'll see that really, if there's any group that has a claim to this area, it's the Tatars, who ruled the area for a millennium, but then were booted out in 1944 by Joe Stalin.
Or cleansed, as he liked to put it, as if they were unclean.
Right.
As was he and 35 million other people that he did the same to. So what's the Russian beef with Ukraine now? Clearly, it's more than beef. It's the whole cow.
It's the cow. So understand. So that they're killing Russians and Russian identified people in the East, the Ukrainians. And it goes back to 2010 when the Ukrainians actually elected a guy from the Donbass area, Viktor Yanukovych. He started out very friendly to the West. The West refused to give Ukraine any financial help. Putin offered help, so he became pro-Russian. And even though the U.S. Said that the election was fair, he was challenged by the loser Yulia Tymoshenko, who's kind of this ultra-right, ultra-religious Ukrainian nationalist. Yanukovych won re-election in 2014, but the nationalists, that is the people in power now, wouldn't accept the results. So they seized the capital Now, does this sound familiar? It's like the January 6th uprising. The difference is that the January 6th uprising here in America did not overturn the election, but in 2014, the uprising, the insurrection, did overturn the election. It was known as the Maidan uprising, and it did succeed in overthrowing the government. And then there was a massive attack on the Russian ethnics and the Russian speakers of the East. At that point, now I have to say that the Russian speakers of the East were not exactly nonviolent. They formed a vicious separatist movement who, fighting back against the Kiev forces. So again, you have this religious war for the most part. And of course, Russia, the people of Crimea, whether we like it or not, voted to join Russia because they're Russians. Most of them, in fact, Crimea is basically a retirement home for the Russian Navy.
Like St. Petersburg in Florida.
Right. So Russians are
Russia.
Right.
Let me jump in for a second just to let everyone know that it's 10 past the hour. Cary Harrison with you. This is Harrison's Reality Check. You can follow us anytime at Go Harrison, across all social media. Of course, you can get a copy of this show and many others. Also, sign up for the free, our favorite price, free newsletter at goharrison.com. Goharrison.com, where I'm going to send you that which is not allowed on the radio, including stories, videos, and other things. So when I get up to, I don't know, since I just announced it for the first time last week, a couple of hundred people will shoot out the first one, and that'll happen in about a week with a lot of cool goodies just for you. We're talking to Greg Palast, investigative reporter extraordinaire, who's doing a primer on Ukraine, a deep dig, a backstory. You do need a pencil, but the good news, pencil, number 2, as if anyone still has one of those. All you have to do is go in a moment to gregpalast.com, and you're going to actually see the written version of this. You can digest it and understand what he's saying. So as we get to the end of this conversation, Greg, this fact injection, there is a threat of war by Russia. Let's understand, some people may be listening to this when there has now been an action by Russia, or maybe we're still sitting, teetering on a crazy seesaw of what's next. But
okay,
why the threat of war, and why now from Russia?
Okay, so in 2015, like a year after the right wing seized control of the government in Ukraine, in 2015, there was an agreement signed to end the violence, signed by the separatists, signed by the Ukraine government, signed by France, Germany, accepted by Russia, which said, okay, Russia, which had gone in to protect the Russian ethnics in the Donbass, removed all its troops and tanks, and there was a ceasefire and an agreement to give this region, the Donbass, some autonomy, protect the Donbass Russian ethnics, but the Ukrainian government simply never implemented the agreement for autonomy, and never really. On one hand, they claim the Donbass, but they still attack the people of Donbass. It's like they don't get to vote in the elections. In addition, though, on the other hand, the Russian ethnics, the Orthodox of the basically, again, they're part of the Moscow Patriarchate. So it's a religious war going on here. Those guys created a separatist movement, declared the Donetsk Republic as an independence group, and they're not exactly sweethearts. They're holding, again, 3,000 of their civilians have been killed, but on the other hand, they're taking Ukrainian hostages. So the problem is every side gives lip service to this agreement called the Minsk Agreement. The problem, it's all lip and no service.
All right. I just want to give a programming note because we've got the great Ryan Wilson hanging on the line. I'm just going to ask for his forbearance to hang on for a couple of more minutes. He's with the Human Rights Campaign. We're going to talk about the wonderful and fabulous Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, who must have had horrific gay sex, so much so that he still can't walk straight and has a real bone to pick, and there is every pun intended in that, because even Hitler didn't hate the Jews as much as this guy is going after the gays right now. Oops, Godwin's law, don't do that. But I think you get where I'm going with this, because this guy is on fire, and you are next. Whoever you are, check any box. It doesn't matter. We're going to find out what that means and where that goes next. As we continue to talk right now with Greg Palast, gregpalast.com is where you're going to find the written version of this conversation. And I will put it into our free newsletter, goharrison.com. All you have to do is sign up for free. We'll never sell your email address. Goharrison.com, sign up for the free newsletter, and we'll make sure you get this full written perspective that Greg Palast is unfolding for us right now. So you're pointing out the famous pipeline that we've all heard of, Greg Palast, the famous pipeline that is supplying Europe and mostly Germany with natural gas and oil. Is this really all about the oil, as we're led to believe?
It's 100% about the oil. Because look, by threatening Ukraine, Putin was able to jump the price of oil to nearly $100 a barrel. Russia lives and dies on oil. 40% of Russia's entire federal budget comes from oil and gas revenues. And now Russia is flush. And they don't have to invade anyone. They just have to move some tanks around. And suddenly they're making about $500 million clear every day while the conflict goes on.
Yeah. And, Russia's GDP is half of the state of California. That's only one of our 50 states. So it's piddly, but you're right. Just moving the stuff around the chessboard causes everyone to panic and freak out. Look at the oil prices today on Wall Street, way over $90, when 2 years ago, oil, what's that? So does that mean that Putin's not going to invade, Greg Palast?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
The threat of invasion is much more valuable than the actual invasion from his point of view, from Russia's point of view, because it keeps up the price of oil. And remember, the problem of invading all of Ukraine is that it will give those Russians that Afghan feeling. Remember, the Soviet Union fell apart because of its invasion of Afghanistan in '79. You start bringing back those body bags, it's just like Vietnam. That will bring down Putin's government. So I think that the real issue, if I were a betting man, and I don't, I would say that Biden was actually right when he said what he's thinking about is what he called the minor incursion by Russia. And everyone made fun of Biden, but he's dead right. I think if Russia makes any move, it'll be to go into the Donbass, into this little sliver of Ukraine that's on the Russian border, and protect Russian ethnics there. And no one in Europe is going to give a damn. NATO won't do a damn thing because it's really Russia, and they know it.
So to finish, what's the solution?
Now, that's easy to know. Putin's a black belt, so the only way to take down a black belt in judo is to attack them where they're least expecting. And in this case,
the oily undergarments.
In the oily undergarments. So the first thing to do is let's end this insane embargo that the United States and Europe has on Venezuela. We say, oh, well, they're not a democratic country. So we get our oil from democracies like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kazakhstan. If we end the Venezuelan oil embargo, the price of oil will collapse. Germany can then get its gas supplies from Venezuela, and then Putin will be suddenly he'll be broke. And I think he's just going to say to the Orthodox Russians in the Donbass, hey, guys, I'm a little short this week. You're on your own.
So if it were up to you, Greg, what would you do?
Do two things. Number one, let's just give it back to the Tatars. It's their country. It's not Russians or Ukrainians. The second is go to kpfk.org. We are in the middle of a fund drive, and I got to tell you, there's a crazy man named Greg Palast who's put up a matching grant. There's $300 left for a matching grant for supporters of Reality Check. You got to make that donation by the top of the hour, and I will match it. Make me pay. This is Greg Palast saying go to kpfk.org and make your donation now. I will match it. Please, let's get that. Let's keep this precious thing going on the air. If you think that Reality Check and the Greg Palast Fact Injection are worthwhile, join me. Support this extraordinary thing. KPFK FM We the People Radio, kpfk.org. Go there now.
Thank you so much, Greg Palast. That's your fact injection. You can also call 818-985-KPFK. Make a donation that way. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to be talking to Ryan C. Wilson. He is the Associate Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign. And today, they, along with Equality Florida and others, were in Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, because the governor, everyone knows Ron DeSantis. Well, he pulled a fast one, and he means business. It's not that he actually believes any of this stuff, but he knows that a certain segment of the country will follow any bit of lunacy. And unfortunately, lunacy turns to policy. That's why you need grown-ups at the Human Rights Campaign and others to monitor this. And as they would say, splain Lucy. Coming up in just a sec.
Harrison's Reality Check. GoHarrison.com.
Late this
How
year,
was that?
the men of the Starship Enterprise will make their final voyage. Who will take their place? It's the wives of Star Trek.
Mrs. Scott, we need more Chablis on the bridge if we're going to make that blue light special on K-Moss before it ends.
I cannot do it, Mrs. Captain. We need more Waterford crystal.
Well, then wash some more.
My nails will not stand the strain.
Mrs. Spock, quickly, analysis.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Captain. I'm experiencing a mood swing.
Mrs. Bones, you're needed on the bridge. Mrs. Spock is under attack by her,
Damn it, Mrs. Kim. You just made my souffle fall. I'm a homemaker, not a gynecologist.
Should I give her a back rub, Mrs. Captain?
Keep your hands to yourself, Mr. O'Hara, but report to my quarters in 15 minutes.
All right, but
Miss Sulu, chart a course for Cruising Lodger 3.
The wives of Star Trek, coming to a theater near you.
Beam up the Avon representative, Mrs. Scotty. Moisturize.
Hogwarts' most famous student is fighting the dark arts with a full frontal assault.
Put on your invisibility cloak, Potter. We can see your thing that must not be named.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Bear Azkaban.
Potter, you're hung like a muggle.
But Professor Dumbledore, it's so cold here at Gryffindor.
You must conjure a spell immediately.
Viagra, Cialis, Levitra is great. Enlarge my wand before it's too late.
Well done, Potter.
Thank you, sir. Now I'm off to find Hermione.
Harry Potter returns in an all-nude adventure. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Bear Azkaban. Now showing everything.
preventing truth decay. Harrison's Reality Check. GoHarrison.com. Reality Check Live with Cary Harrison.
And it is 22 minutes past the hour. Cary Harrison with you, your new best friend. Welcome. We were just talking to Greg Palast earlier, and he threw out a matching grant of $300. You can support KPFK, and you will make him pay. As he said, all you have to do is go to kpfk.org, kpfk.org, and make your grant any amount that you feel comfortable, that you feel able, even if you feel incapable and unable. Go ahead and do it anyway and make him pay. Matching grant of $300 right now, and you've got until the end of the hour. We're going to check in a little later and continue reminding you that it's a fun drive. But throughout this program, you can go to kpfk.org and make a donation, any kind, to support Harrison's Reality Check, because you ain't going to hear anything like you heard earlier of why, what, who, when, and what is the plot of the play in Ukraine, except you heard it here succinctly and brilliantly. Plus, you can go to gregpalast.com. You'll be able to see a whole written analysis on what we talked about. And I will include that in the free newsletter that you're going to sign up for at goharrison.com. Well, let me tell you what's going on right now, because this is going to affect you, no matter where you're listening, no matter where you're standing right now. Because when I moved out of Florida back in 1997, I was news director for a big rock station called 98 Rock. And I do not listen to that music, by the way. I couldn't tell you who, nothing from nothing. But that's okay. They didn't hire me for that. And we were endlessly at war with the severe extreme right and the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, they've all reemerged in the last 4 years under President Trump, haven't they? Just bed sheets for everyone, percales flapping in the wind. It is a Ku Kluxery on steroids. Well, it's come back to Florida in a big way, just like it was years ago. And this morning, Equality Florida launched the first of 2 TV ads highlighting the impacts of famous Governor Ron DeSantis, who's got a legislative agenda threatening to turn Florida into a surveillance state. Now, I know that dings your bell when you hear surveillance state. We live in one. No kidding. It's called an iPhone. It's called a droid. It's in your pocket. Everywhere you go, everywhere you have ever been in the last decade is in the cloud. Forever. Forever. Which means if retroactively a law were made against you or something you said or thought or a naughty JPEG you ever downloaded or a video you watched on one of those I never did websites like a good Republican might, well, retroactively, they'd be able to find everything you ever did, every text message you sent, etc. So that's a surveillance state in the larger sense. Let's bring the camera in now, closer to the Sunshine State. So Ron DeSantis wants a broad license to censor conversations about, and we all know this, American history, but not the American history where the great Christopher Columbus came and scoured the soil to make it safe for the white people to come in their wagon trains. There weren't any, but don't ask him. He's a history professor, apparently, along with a medical expert and a scientist, and can tell you about the second law of thermodynamics in Pig Latin. So no American history conversations that don't jibe with him. He's not exactly white, by the way, but that's okay. The origins of racism and injustice, we're not allowed to talk about that if it's from the side of not him and his friends, or the existence of LGBT people. Speaking of Ukraine, where there are no gay people, apparently in Florida, there are no gay people either, except for me when I go down to visit. And then I leave, and apparently there are none left there. So they've put together an ad on TV to change that. Bottom line is, it's called the Don't Say Gay bill. You can swap the word gay for anything you want. Black, we know it is. Can't talk about history, can't talk about slavery, can't talk about civil rights, equal rights, or any naughtinesses that happened over hundreds and hundreds of years. Not allowed. So just swap out the word. The only thing that's happening today is you're allowed to say gay and nobody cringes. But if you said the Don't Say Jew bill, don't say black bill, don't say fill in all kinds of blank bills, but you can still say gay for some reason. And we're going to find out why. And I want to welcome and thank you for your kind patience and tolerance, Ryan Wilson. He's the Associate Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign. Clearly, I'm wound up, Ryan. But you are a soothing emollient to my particularly troubled spirit today. And I'm so glad to have adult supervision here on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So big things are afoot here in Florida, there in Florida, everywhere in Florida. Florida being, I guess, these petri dish for larger things that they hope to have, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what we are seeing in Florida is not unique to just Florida. We are seeing all kinds of bills all around the country that are trying to stop conversations about what they're calling critical race theory, but honesty about history and historic stuff in many states. And Florida has one that's particularly egregious because it targets LGBTQ plus people.
Well, because they can get away with it. See, once you can establish a group of people for whom you can remove rights and target, then you can just say, and then they're friends. Because their friends are like, associate murderers.
Well, if you stigmatize words like gay and transgender, bisexual, or lesbian, and a student asks questions about things, or even just brings a picture of their two parents, their two moms, as the commercial talks about, right?
Sure.
That oh, that's a word we can't talk about. You're going to have to go home and ask your parents about that. By censoring certain words, it's going to create stigma. That stigma can lead to mental health problems for young people, or just a sense of erasure of our histories. How can you talk about Harvey Milk, but not talk about him being gay, right?
What's the point?
Yeah, I mean, he's historic because he was a trailblazer.
That's right. That's
You erase his sexuality, it takes away the impact of the story.
Yeah, he was a wonderful county supervisor. And
Right.
let's talk for a second about a reality that maybe a lot of people don't know. So we know that approximately 10% of the global human population is gay-ish, more intensely, maybe at smaller numbers. A lot of people will never admit it, depending where they live. Ukraine, Russia, a lot of places, not okay. So we actually don't have real numbers, but we also know that 10% of the mammal population actually is same-sexual, whether it's penguins, seagulls, manatees. I just love the sound of that. And of course, giraffes are like 83%. They go way over the top. Maybe it's the long neck. It's kind of hot. I don't know. But we know that this is a phenomenon in nature that has gone back since the beginning of humankind. We know this to be a fact because Alexander the Great, who conquered all of the known world at the time, had a boyfriend. And it wasn't a shameful thing. We know that the Emperor Hadrian of the Roman Empire, who built libraries and palaces all over the planet, one of the greatest guys, built a entrance for his boyfriend Antinous in front of Zeus's temple in Greece. Zeus, the god of all gods, the beginning of all godliness from the beginning of time, right in front of him is the gay boyfriend's gate. And the Greeks still drive by it and nobody gets hurt. No eggs are thrown. It's not a problem. So it has always existed throughout humanity until, as we discover, religious stuff comes in. But Ron DeSantis is not doing this because he has some special bond with some biblical passage that actually is out of context. It's because he is pulling for the wrong people who don't know nothing about nothing and actually think that's grammatically correct. And they're going to follow him, especially if he pisses them off. And they're already upset and disenfranchised. So he's the pitchfork and the what pitchforks and what? Peasants. Well, whatever. Unpleasants. That was a really long question that might not even have an answer. But generally, Ron DeSantis is not doing this out of, let's just say, moral scruples.
No, I mean, we know that the far right and extremist legislators are using LGBTQ kids, in particular young people, as a motivating factor for the ballot. I mean, last year, anti-trans sports bans passed in a number of states. We had 25 anti-LGBTQ bills passed last year. And already this year, South Dakota has passed a ban on transgender kids playing in sports. Kentucky advanced one today. And these Don't Say Gay or Trans bills, the Stop Woke Act, all these things in Florida, they're just part of a machine cranking out draft bills from some far-right think tanks, giving them to legislators and hoping that they'll run with them. And then people like Ron DeSantis championing them as part of their larger political goals.
Ryan Wilson is the Associate Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign. Cary Harrison with you. This is Harrison's Reality Check. And we're talking about what is going on in Florida right now, which is just part of what's going on all over the country right now. We are attacking our own. So the question is, and this is one that you would have much more access to, Ryan Wilson, because I actually don't. What is so scary about some gay guy 2 miles down the road watching Netflix with his boyfriend, and maybe they make out and nobody is there to see it, witness it, or even know it ever happened? But the notion of it upsets Mildred so much in her double wide that the thing tips over and cracks in half, if we're to believe Ron DeSantis.
Well, I think fear is a motivator for a lot of politicians, and you often find that people fear what they don't understand. So because they are trying to closet us, they've been trying for generations to closet us, it has always been, I mean, we referenced Harvey Milk, giving people hope, being visible is how we change hearts and minds. And so they are just using another tactic to try and keep us bottled up and keep our stories out of the news, out of our schools, out of trainings and classroom, like workplace trainings. anything to try and keep us hidden, and then use us as the villain as they try to mobilize fear.
Well, and it's clearly nonsense, I think, to most people, but there is a third of every country, and always has been throughout history. A third of Germany loved the Fuhrer. A third of this country loved and still loves Donald Trump. A third of this, a third of that. And it only takes a third for bad things to happen, because the other third, that is the woke sector, that is the alert, enlightened, and smart ones, they're fighting back against that third. And then you have the final third that does nothing, that has always done nothing. They just kind of go to work and shampoo their hair and have din and walk the dog and kind of watch. And that's where the problem is, because you've got kind of a co-balance of the antimatter and the matter, the nitwits and the people who are enlightened, and then the people in the middle who are sitting there just watching. So here we are at a critical breaking point, because we've got the midterm elections coming up. We've also got statistics that most people don't realize. We know that teen suicide has massive numbers. I mean, teen suicide et al. At large, all teens. Then we get into the LGBTQI, LMNOP. I never know. I can't keep up with my own alphabet. What are those statistical numbers so that people really can wrap their head around how this stuff going on in Florida and the rest of the country causes people to kill themselves? Maybe you didn't hear me, Ryan.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were asking me the statistics. I don't have the numbers in front of me of the specifics, but I will tell you that we know that LGBTQ people are at higher risk for discrimination, and that discrimination, whether it's in the schools or in the workplace, can make a real impact on their mental health. And we know that the numbers are drastically higher. When we talk to like the Trevor Project, and they say our phones have been ringing off the hook with people expressing concerns about these legislations that are targeting young people, like we know it has an impact. And it's also just when you hear all the negative rhetoric that these politicians are using, we have to counter that with these kinds of commercials like Equality Florida is putting out to help people understand what's at stake.
Cary Harrison with you. If you want to see a video of this, where you can actually see the handsome Ryan Wilson, the handsome Greg Palast, and the reasonable appearance visage of me, you can go to goharrison.com, not at this moment, but later today. We'll have a video of this posted. You can also sign up for the free newsletter, where you are going to get the written version of what Greg was talking about, and you'll also be able to get a transcript of this conversation so you can follow it more closely. Excuse me, given that people drive and stuff and you just can't hear anything. We're finishing up a conversation with Ryan Wilson, the Associate Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign, about really the appalling behavior by the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who is no stranger to anybody who's turned on even the local news. He pops up saying wild and absurd things, but to a certain number of the population, it's real. For example, in Florida, which has been maskless for about a year now, during a blizzard of Omicron, and the best you could expect out of anyone is maybe 1 out of 100 people wears like a chin diaper, which is where your mask is kind of hanging off your chin. It doesn't quite hit the nostrils. And that's it. And so I asked a few people, I said, well, what is it about the masks? It's not what we think. We, in quotation marks, we who listen to KPFK and go to kpfk.org and make a donation knowing that Greg Palast has a matching grant of $300. Not that we, the other we. Well, the governor is the grown-up. He is the man in charge. He is the essence of all things known and unknown for your government. If your government officially tells you, don't wear a mask, like wear a seatbelt, stop at red lights or you'll get a ticket, you go, okay. So it's not a cynical, weird Bill Gates has molecular stuff in the vaccine, whether he does or not, is irrelevant. They're just following what the governor said, just like you did in Nassau in the late 1800s, or your head fell off suddenly while you were asleep. So this is the problem, is you've got a governor making official gubernatorial declarations about gay people, and people go, well, it's the government saying it. It must be true. And I think this is where we, Ryan Wilson, as civilians, as civic-minded people, can no longer sit on the sidelines and go, well, that's very unpleasant. That's inappropriate. You know, like my liberal friends, that's inappropriate behavior. I'm gonna watch Amazon Prime this evening and I'll feel better. I feel better when I watch it too. So nothing against Amazon Prime, but this is suit up and show up time, because if we don't, it gets bigger.
Yeah. And honestly, with these bills moving in so many places, I realize that folks think, maybe with marriage equality, we finished certain of our checklists, right? But we haven't finished the gay agenda. Like we have these attacks that are coming state after state. And so we need people to contact their legislators, not just the people that live in the big cities like Miami and Orlando. If they live in the smaller communities along the beaches and in the rural parts of Florida, they need to be engaged too, to call their legislators and follow Equality Florida on the social media, because they have all the action alerts. Go to HRC. You can find our pages as well. But, advocacy takes minutes now that we have tools that people can just type in the message and send it. But when there are hundreds of messages calling into some of these smaller legislative offices, they're feeling the pressure. And the more pressure we can turn up, the more we can point at Florida and say, don't go this direction. Then maybe we can stop other states from following suit.
Well, very well said, my friend. And thank you so much for coming on today and making clear the unclear and the insane. There is no way to put lipstick on that pig. But we know you're there. And after hearing your voice or seeing your video, nobody's going to ever want to hurt this guy. He's an example of, like, look, nice humans. Let's have them around. They contribute. And at the end of the day, I think we all want to contribute to the human race and to a better life for all. And let me just disabuse anyone, because you said gay agenda, and I heard some pearls being clutched somewhere in the background there. There is no official gay agenda. I still haven't gotten it. I've been waiting for it for years.
Right.
But what Ryan means is, I'll let you explain.
Well, I mean, that's just the point. There is no agenda, even though that's been hurled at us many times. Many of us just want to live. We want to be able to go to school and talk about our lives. We want to be able to talk about who we love and who we are in our workplace. And these bills that try to erase us, they are the real problem. And there is a concerted agenda from the other side trying to push us back into the closet. So, my agenda is just trying to live and say it's okay to say gay on a daily basis.
All right. And do you know where the word gay came from? I just found this out recently from somebody in Palm Springs who is a historian of really weird trivia. So, and you probably know this, Ryan Wilson, Associate Regional Field Director at the Human Rights Campaign. In New York, in the Village, there is Gay Street. We've all seen it. If you've ever been to New York City, I know Greg Palast has. I know pretty much everyone has been to New York City. There is Gay Street. Well, the gays, once upon a time, used to meet there back when they were the Mattachine Society and these very early iterations under code names. They would meet at hotels and have little meetings and talk about their agenda then, which is how not to get a lead pipe across your head by the cops. That agenda, that one, like, let's make it to midnight. And so they met in a house on Gay Street. So they became known as the gays, the people that meet on Gay Street. And that's how we got the term. It has nothing to do with laughter. Thank you, Greg. We just got the hand gestures. Exactly. The jazz hands. as only our straight friends interpret. I want to thank you so much, Ryan Wilson. Quick shout out. Where can we follow you and your good work?
Yeah, so follow at Human Rights Campaign or HRC. Check out Equality Florida, Equality FL on various social media, and you'll be able to see the work that we and our partners are doing.
Well, thank you so much. I hope I didn't scare you too bigly. I'm a little wound up today, but that's because of this Cuban coffee. I mean, I have to recommend it. And you have to have at least 4 pots. It just really does some Disney magic for you. I appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. And onward and upward, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, my friend. Coming up, it's 1:45. We're going to go back, check in with Greg Palast. We're going to check out his matching grant and also do a finish up on why KPFK and public radio and independent media is so critically important, especially at this time when you heard what's going on in Florida, what's going on in various states across the North, across the Midwest, and how on a daily basis you, whoever you are in the crosshairs as the surveillance state continues to grow.
Reality Check Live with Cary Harrison. Harrison's Reality Check.
All righty, that was just a little nod to Florida back in the good old days when it was fun before all the madness that is today. And the great Bob Gnarly, what a brilliant talent he was, and all the old folks back when radio used to sound like radio. But here we are today in whatever it is today, which is why we're talking about keeping it alive. If you have heard the name Clear Channel, you know what that is. If you've heard of Cumulus, if you've heard even of, well, Sirius XM at least does a stand-up job in providing a lot of variation. But if you're listening to the AM band, it is crackle, static, and just, I think the aggregate tooth count is about 7. And it's very frightening to most people. If you're listening to FM, it is pabulum and homogeneity and nothing really new, interesting, and cutting edge. Here's the quick secret before I jump to Greg Palast. And this happened some years ago. In the computer age, tapes spinning. In the computer age, and this is about 15 years ago, the big radio operators like Clear Channel realized that they could fire 60,000 radio people forever. So in 2008, when the stock markets imploded and everything fell to poop, that was the first time that corporate America had the pretext in modern memory for anybody where they could lay off tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, never to have to rehire them again. And so the radio companies did exactly that. They blew out all of the local radio people. And you'll remember as a kid growing up, even if you're still a kid now, you might remember there was a local news guy and a local this and a local that. And the traffic was actually local, not in Iowa, looking at a computer screen telling you about the 405 or the 310. No, or the 301 if you're 400 miles east. Now it's all done remotely. Not only that, but there is one disc jockey servicing 1,600 radio stations every day. But you're saying, well, wait a minute. I listen and he gives the local call letters and he even gives the time and cough, wheeze, gag. It can't be recorded. Well, guess what? He takes a whole day and he gives the time and they record it. And then he takes a whole day and he records call letters. Maybe not all 1,600, but maybe 100 a day for a couple of weeks. And then the computer chops it up and just drops them in. And it sounds just like he said it. And all he's doing is talking up a song, coming out of the song, whatever. And that's it. And servicing all these stations. So they are now from 60,000 employees down to 1. Does that mean the profits are better? Uh-huh. Does that mean that all these people will never work again? Yeah, especially in radio. Does that mean that we all volunteer on KPFK? 100%. Do I get paid? No. Does Greg Palast get paid to be here? No. Why are we here? Because we have to be here. because if we're not here, this will not be done. So, Greg Palast, I just want to welcome you back as you and I finished up these last 8 minutes here talking about why this is so important, why this antenna that blasts through people's windshields. No, there's no bandwidth limitation with radio. 1 million people can listen, and the bandwidth doesn't go down one iota. It's that important, and the message that we're able to deliver, well, it's not free. We're free, but it's not free.
Yep. Well, in fact, let me do this. If you think that the information you heard today on Reality Check is valuable, then you're going to go to kpfk.org, kpfk.org, make your pledge. And if you do it in the next 7 minutes, I'm going to match it. Okay? This is Greg Palast. I will put up the money. So I don't get paid to do this, but I will pay to support this because I do work. And look, I have a day job. If you watch any of this video, I'm the guy, Democracy Now! With that fedora hat. I don't get paid to do that. I do get paid by BBC Television, Rolling Stone, Nation, etc. So why do I do this? Because there's nothing like this on the air. It is the reality check as opposed to the unreality check. I was just looking at the New York Times story about Ukraine, Cary. And by the way, while I'm talking, I hope you're going to kpfk.org. You can also make a call to 818-985 KPFK. That's 818-985 5735, 818-985 5735. Wonderful people waiting for your call. Happy to speak to you. Happy to take your donation. And Greg Palast, the guy's talking to you. I'm going to match it. And you've got 6 minutes to do that. kpfk.org. I was just reading the New York Times article on Ukraine. And you know, one of the most interesting things is that the reports, if you look at the most important thing about the Times and these other papers, look at what's called the dateline, which is actually the location where it's written. It's coming out of Washington, D.C. So they're reporting on Ukraine from Washington, D.C. Okay, I just told you about people I'm talking to in the Donbass region. And then they have one single reporter who was there weeks ago who was in Kiev. And he was in Western Ukraine talking about a soldier who was killed by the separatists. There is no mention at all of the UN Human Rights Watch report saying that 3,000 or more civilians have been killed by the Ukrainian government. 3,000. Now, Putin calls it a genocide. I don't know whether you want to call it a genocide or just bad behavior. Doesn't matter what you call it. You're not getting that report absolutely anywhere. Again, this is Human Rights Watch in the UN, but you're only going to get that on kpfk.org. I'm not a fan of Putin. He's a fascist. Tomorrow, Navalny, his opposition leader, it goes on trial. I'm not a buddy of his, but I am a friend of reality. That's why I do this fact injection, and that's why you need to inject your share by going to kpfk.org and say, Greg Palast sent you, make him pay, make him put up that matching money. Thank you for those who've already done that. I've already paid out some for this program, and you'll hear me again this week on Flashpoints with Dennis Bernstein. Amazing new current affairs program at 5 p.m. on the dial on KPFK every day, Monday through Friday. This ain't free. Dennis Bernstein is not charging to add the Los Angeles area to his broadcast. But he is saying, hey, listen, I can give you the program for free, but if someone doesn't pay the electric bills, that signal goes off, that wonderful signal that we have.
I'm going to jump in here, Greg Palast, for a second, because we're down to 2 minutes. And you said something very important. The reason that we do this for free, and we do this, professionally elsewhere, the reason we do this for free here is because we can't do this elsewhere. We can only do this here. This is it. And if we don't do it, it doesn't get done. And it goes dark. I don't mean just the station. I mean the information. Most people would never show up and do it for free. They'd say, F you, and never do it for free. We're like you, the listener. We're like you. We're here for free and for fun and to be enlightened and to give back in every way we can. And that's why This is so important, not only to us, but to you. And kpfk.org, please go right now, click that mouse, make that contribution. We're down to like 15 seconds. Greg, why don't you finish it up?
818-985. KPFK 818-985-5735. This is Greg Palast saying this is the moment for you. It's not National Petroleum Radio.
Definitely not. And don't forget to go to goharrison.com. Get your free newsletter. You're going to get a transcript of today's show. You're also going to get to see the video and a transcript of what Greg was talking about earlier. We will see you next Tuesday. I hope you have a great week.
Harrison's Reality Check. Follow us on social media at Go Harrison.
Let me tell you a story. On June 23rd, 1960.